My name is Huxley, and I am 27 years old. I stood silently in the last pew of the chapel, his jaw tight, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his dark coat. I didn't cry when the old man died, but I never expected what came next. The air inside was thick with incense and strained politeness. Organ music hummed low, while distant relatives whispered behind half-covered mouths. Huxley's eyes stayed fixed on the closed casket at the front, his grandfather's final resting place. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the fallout. To everyone else, Huxley was the outsider, the black sheep who dared show up uninvited. He felt their stares like needles, but something in his gut told him this day wouldn't end in silence. As the final hymn faded, the family lawyer cleared his throat, holding a sealed envelope. Huxley didn't know it yet, but that moment was about to shatter everything he thought he knew. If you're hooked already, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to follow the full story. They looked at me like I didn't belong. Maybe I didn't. The words echoed in Huxley's mind as he stepped out into the garden behind the chapel. The post-service gathering in full swing. The sun filtered through tall oaks, casting golden patches over white linen tables. Laughter, light conversation, clinking glasses, all of it felt like a cruel joke played on him. The warmth of the setting didn't match the frost in the air. When he passed through the crowd, he'd barely made it to feet before his Aunt Valerie narrowed her eyes and whispered something to her husband. Just loud enough for Huxley to hear the phrase "nerve" to show his face. He said nothing. He'd expected it. After all, he was the grandson who stopped coming around, the one who never called, the one who left home angry and stayed that way. But no one knew the full story. They only knew Grandpa's respected, untouchable. Huxley had questions. Still did. But this wasn't the time or place for answers. Cousin Tyler approached, holding a glass of wine like it was a trophy. "Didn't think we'd see you again," Hux, he said, his smile a tightrope between sarcasm and hostility. Huxley forced a grin. "Surprise," Tyler chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Well, I hope you're not here expecting anything. Gramps was pretty clear on where he stood with you." With a pat on the shoulder, Tyler walked off, victorious. The words didn't sting, at least, not in the way Tyler meant them to. What hurt was the truth underneath them. Huxley had burned a bridge he wasn't sure he ever wanted to rebuild. And now here he was, surrounded by a family who wished he hadn't come. In a house filled with legacy and love he had long been exiled from. Inside the main hall of the estate, old portraits lined the walls, generations of Callahans staring down with frozen pride. Huxley found himself in front of one of Grandpa's photos from 20 years ago. Tall, sharp-suited, that signature steel gaze. It brought him back to being a kid, hiding behind the staircase during one of their infamous shouting matches. Huxley used to think that anger meant love. Now, he wasn't so sure. From across the room, his mother avoided his gaze entirely, wrapped in polite conversation with people she used to call friends and now barely tolerated. She hadn't spoken to him since the news of Grandpa's death. No call, no text, not even a cold message to say, "Come, if you want." Even the servants acted like he didn't exist. One walked right past him with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, skipping him altogether like he was part of the wallpaper. Huxley looked down at his scuffed shoes, suddenly very aware of how little he matched this picture-perfect scene. As the family mingled, small clusters formed, people he hadn't seen in years, now deep in conversation about properties, stocks, and how the old man had amassed so much with so little. Nobody was talking about who Grandpa was as a person, just what he left behind. The entire thing felt less like mourning and more like a pre-auction gathering. Then came the sharp clink of a glass. The lawyer, Mr. Halbrook, a man in his 60s, with paper-thin glasses and a deep voice, stood near the center of the room. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, voice slicing through the murmurs. "Per Mr. Callahan's final request, we will now proceed with the reading of the will." And just like that, all conversation stopped. Chairs were pulled, glasses set down, smiles faded. The crowd shifted toward the large dining room, where a folder sat closed in front of Mr. Halbrook. Huxley hesitated for a moment, watching everyone file in. Nobody looked back to see if he was coming. It didn't matter. He would be there anyway. As he walked toward the room, he caught the eye of his grandmother for the first time. She didn't smile, didn't scowl, just looked at him like he was some distant dream from a life she didn't want to remember. That was the moment it hit him. Not only did they think he didn't belong, maybe they were right, but Huxley kept walking. Something in his chest told him not to leave just yet. As everyone settles in for the reading of the will, An undercurrent of tension builds. Huxley, though disrespected and isolated, knows instinctively that this moment might change everything. Then the lawyer cleared his throat, and everything changed. The room fell into a respectful silence, the kind that settles like dust in the air, quiet, but heavy. Mr. Halbrook adjusted his wire-framed glasses and opened the thick leather folder in front of him. Its contents, aged and formal, like everything Grandpa had ever touched. The Callahan family gathered around the long oak dining table, each person carrying an air of entitlement, cloaked in grief. Huxley stood by the doorway, alone, hands clasped behind his back. Every part of him tense. Mr. Halbrook began reading the will with measured dignity. I, Richard Alistair Callahan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. What followed was, in many ways, expected. To Aunt Valerie, the beach house in Cape May. To Uncle Gordon, the vineyard in Napa. To his mother, the family estate and the trust to maintain it. It was like watching puzzle pieces fall neatly into place for everyone but Huxley. There was no mention of him, not even a footnote. No token item, no words of remembrance. Just omission, deliberate and clean. Huxley felt his stomach turn not from shock, but from the cold confirmation of what he'd already assumed. He didn't belong in this picture, not in their family legacy, not even in Grandpa's last words. He was about to step away, quietly and unnoticed, when Mr. Halbrook paused mid-sentence. A slight flicker of discomfort passed over his face. There is one final matter. A subtle shift moved through the room. Heads tilted, brows furrowed. Mr. Halbrook set the main will aside and retrieved a second envelope, smaller, yellowed, and sealed with a red wax emblem. It is a codicil, he explained. A legally binding addition to the will, added in private 6 months before Mr. Callahan's passing. It was not discussed with the rest of the family, as per his explicit request. The room murmured. Huxley's mother shot a sharp glance toward the lawyer. Aunt Valerie leaned forward, suspicion written all over her face. Mr. Halbrook held the envelope up for all to see. This document is addressed to Mr. Huxley Callahan. Silence. It hit the room like a storm surge. Huxley's heart thumped hard in his chest. Every pair of eyes turned to him now, and not with indifference, but with shock. And in some cases, rage. There must be a mistake, Uncle Gordon muttered. That boy hasn't spoken to my father in nearly a decade. Mr. Halbrook didn't flinch. Nevertheless, this codicil was signed, witnessed, and notarized. Mr. Callahan was in full possession of his faculties at the time, without waiting for approval from the stunned audience. He broke the seal and unfolded the aged document. To Huxley, my grandson, he read, voice now carrying a strange weight, like he was reading something far more personal than legal. You and I never saw eye to eye. But if you're hearing this, it means you came so. You deserve to know. I never forgot you. Never stopped watching. You always were different. And that difference is why I'm leaving you something that no one else can claim. The room was stone still. There is a key, Mr. Halbrook continued, contained in a lockbox, now in my possession. Along with that key is a letter. Where it leads, and what it opens, is a matter left entirely to you. Gasps, whispers, and a rising tide of objections stirred around the table. He gets a letter and a key. What does that even mean? Someone spat. Probably just more drama from Dad. He always loved his riddles. But Huxley wasn't listening. His world had gone strangely quiet. In the midst of a room buzzing with resentment, all he could hear was the voice in his head replaying that one sentence. You always were different. He didn't move when Mr. Halbrook came toward him with the small black lockbox. The man placed it gently in Huxley's hands, like it was fragile or sacred. Huxley looked down at it, metal, old-fashioned, with an antique brass keyhole. The lawyer cleared his throat again. This is to be opened in private. Mr. Callahan specified that the contents were for your eyes only. Huxley looked up, locking eyes with Mr. Halbrook. The man gave him a faint nod, almost respectful. Behind him the room erupted. This is ridiculous. Aunt Valerie barked. That key could go to anything. Why would Dad hide some final message, just for him? Huxley didn't answer. He didn't need to. For once, he wasn't standing in the shadows of their judgment. Something real, something personal, had been left for him. Not for money, not for show, but something his grandfather had wanted only him to see. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the room, box in hand, ignoring the heated protests behind him. As the heavy door shut behind his back, he exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He was no longer invisible. And something told him this was just the beginning. With the lockbox now in his possession, Huxley steps into a private world left behind by his grandfather, one filled with secrets, riddles, and a purpose meant only for him. The hunt for answers begins. To my grandson, I leave what truly matters. The sentence lingered in Huxley's mind as he sat alone in one of the estate's private guest rooms, the lockbox resting on the antique desk before him. The door was locked, the blinds half drawn, and for the first time all day, he felt the eyes of the family off his back. He turned the small brass key in the lock with a quiet click, and slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay two things. First, an aged, folded letter on cream parchment, sealed with the same wax insignia that had closed the codicil envelope. Second, brass compass, worn and scratched, the kind old explorers might have carried centuries ago. Its needle quivered, pointing not to north but to something unknown. Huxley picked up the letter and broke the seal with trembling fingers. Huxley, if you're reading this, it means you showed up. You probably didn't come for me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure. Doesn't matter. What matters is you came. That says more than you think. We didn't end on good terms. I said things I shouldn't have. You did too. But that fire in you, I saw it early. You weren't meant to follow in anyone's footsteps. You were meant to forge your own trail. I didn't show it, but I admired that. Still, this isn't about money, land, or possessions. I taught the others how to earn, but I saved something different for you. What I left you isn't a thing, it's a choice. A path. Follow the compass. It doesn't point north. It points to where you need to go. Inside, not outside. But you'll figure that out. I always trusted your instincts. Start in the garden, the one I never let anyone touch. There, beneath the lion statue, you'll find the first clue. You want answers. They're out there. But so are truths you might not want to know. Still, I think you're ready, RAC. Huxley lowered the letter, chest tight, throat dry. There was no formality in those words. No legal phrasing. Just the voice of the man he used to fear, used to challenge, and somewhere deep down used to love. It felt like being spoken to from beyond the grave. Not by a grandfather, but by someone who finally saw him. He reached back into the box and turned the compass over. An engraving caught the light. What you seek is what you've always had. It made no sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. For the first time in years, Huxley felt like his grandfather wasn't controlling him, but inviting him to understand something no one else could. He stood, pocketed the compass, folded the letter, and walked to the garden. Outside, the air was crisp and quiet. The others were still inside, arguing over clauses, real estate, and percentages. No one noticed him disappear into the back half of the estate grounds. The family rarely came here. Grandpa always kept this part of the garden private. Just rows of hedges, overgrown trees, and a weathered lion statue standing guard near the corner wall. The statue's base was covered in moss, the stone chipped from time and rain. Huxley knelt down, brushing the dirt away. The compass, now in his palm, quivered slightly again, not pointing anywhere traditional, but pulling forward. He pressed his hand to the lion's paw, and felt something shift. A hollow thunk. Hidden beneath the base was a small iron panel, no bigger than a lunchbox, embedded in the earth. With effort, Huxley pried it open. Inside, another envelope. This one marked simply, Stage 1. Good, you're still with me. You're not just here to find something, you're here to remember. I built this family with rules. But I forgot that rules don't raise men, convictions do. You questioned me. You challenged me. You had something no one else in this family ever did. The guts to walk away. But walking away is easy. Finding your way back, that's rare. Next, clues where I first taught you something. Something that stuck, even when I pretended it didn't. Go back there, and take your time. This isn't a race. It's a reckoning. Huxley stared at the letter, heart pounding. His mind raced. Where had Grandpa first taught him something that stuck? He closed his eyes. The boathouse. Back when he was 10, Grandpa had taught him how to repair a fishing net there. It was the only day he ever called Huxley capable, and that word had carried him through more storms than he could count. As Huxley stood, something shifted inside him, not just interest, purpose. This wasn't a game, it was a legacy. But not the kind they were squabbling over inside. This was personal, intimate, a journey built not on inheritance, but on redemption, discovery and, possibly, forgiveness. Meanwhile, from the mansion windows, a pair of eyes watched him, Aunt Valerie's lips tightened as she saw him disappear again into the trees. She turned back to the others. "He's up to something," she muttered, "and I intend to find out what." With the first clue now in hand, and a hidden trail unfolding, Huxley's quiet inheritance turns into a deeply personal treasure hunt, one that will force him to uncover not just secrets, but truths he's long buried. "He left me a puzzle and one chance to get it right." The sentence repeated in Huxley's head like a mantra as he crossed the gravel path to the old boathouse. In the distance, he could still hear voices leaking from the estate, laughter, gossip, the clink of wine glasses. Inside, they were toasting to their new titles, their property claims, their imagined importance. No one noticed he was gone. Or maybe they just didn't care. But Huxley wasn't looking for what they were after. He wasn't chasing a check or a deed. He was chasing a man, his grandfather. Or rather, the version of him that lived in these cryptic letters and faded memories. The boathouse sat near the edge of the estate, slightly tilted with age. The door groaned as he pushed it open. Dust particles danced in the shaft of sunlight that broke through the cracks in the roof. Wooden crates lined the walls, tools rusting in corners. The scent of river water, old rope, and varnish filled the air. It smelled like the past. He stepped inside, compass in his hand, letter from the lion statue in his pocket. Somewhere in this space was the next message. He just had to find it. His eyes scanned every detail. A faded fishing net still hung from the ceiling beam, probably the very one they'd fixed together. He approached the old workbench, brushing off cobwebs, tugging open the drawers. Nothing. Then he noticed it. Carved faintly into the side panel of the bench was a word. Nearly invisible unless the light hit it just right. Capable. His breath caught. That was the word Grandpa had called him all those years ago. His heart pounded as he traced the letters with his fingers. Beneath it, nailed to the inside of the bench wall, was a small, metal box like a hidden drawer with a sliding panel. He tugged it open. Inside was the second envelope, marked Stage 2. No key this time, just another folded letter. Still following. Good. That day in the boathouse. I saw something in you. You didn't just do the task, you watched, learned, and improved. You didn't wait for permission to solve the problem. That's why this is yours. Because you look deeper when others just look away. Go to the sundial next. The one near the greenhouse. Find the time I always said meant the most to me. That's when I met someone who changed everything. RAC. Huxley closed the box and stood in the quiet stillness, a swirl of emotion rolling beneath his skin. These weren't just directions, they were memories. Lessons. His grandfather hadn't given him money. He'd given him a map back through their relationship. Moment by moment, he left the boathouse, moving fast now, past the stables and up, toward the greenhouse path. This side of the estate was nearly untouched, overgrown, wild, barely tended to anymore. No one cared about this space. No one except Grandpa. He found the old sundial surrounded by creeping ivy and cracked stones. He crouched down, brushing the dirt from its face. The numbers were faded, but one time was etched darker than the rest. 447. A small plaque beneath it read. The minute she smiled, Huxley tilted his head. She, his grandmother. Maybe, or someone else. But more important than the mystery was what lay hidden nearby. He inspected the sundial base. Nothing obvious. Then he remembered what Grandpa always said when they played chess together. If you can't see it above ground, dig beneath. He pried at the edge of a stone with a broken twig, loosening it. Underneath, nestled in dry earth, was a leather pouch. Another envelope. Stage 3. This time, the letter was longer. You've made it this far. That's further than I expected. 447 was the time I met your grandmother. Not because she was beautiful, but because she asked me a question no one else ever had. She challenged me. You remind me of her. Fire wrapped in quiet. The next piece is buried literally. Go to the north field. Under the lone oak. Dig where the roots cross. But don't just dig. Listen. There's something buried there. But also, a truth I never said out loud. And it's time you knew. This part won't feel good. But it will be honest. RAC. As he folded the letter, a chill ran through him. This wasn't just a scavenger hunt anymore. It was a confession. And somewhere, ahead, in the soil beneath that tree, was something Grandpa had carried in silence for years. He took the back trail to the northern edge of the property. The field was golden now, with wild grass and summer haze, the lone oak rising out of the horizon like a monument. As he approached, the compass pulsed in his hand. Not literally, but Something about its weight kept pushing him forward. When he reached the tree, he circled the base. The roots twisted out of the ground like fingers clawing upward. At one point, two thick roots crossed like an X. That was the place. He dropped to his knees and began to dig. The dirt was dry but packed. His hands scraped against stones, nails filled with soil. Sweat rolled down his temples. Then his fingers hit something hard. He cleared the dirt away. A small wooden box, not locked, just latched shut. He opened it. Inside, a photograph, yellowed with time. A young woman, not his grandmother. Smiling, hair blowing in the wind. Behind her, a beach Huxley didn't recognize. And beneath the photo, a final note. Before your grandmother, there was someone else. I never told anyone. She was the reason I almost left this family. The reason I almost walked away from everything I built. But I stayed. I made the safe choice. Not the true one. I regretted that every day. You, Huxley. You don't have to make the same mistake. When you're done following these clues, there will be a decision waiting for you. And it won't be easy. But I believe you'll choose right. The last place to go where I kept everything I wanted to give, but was never allowed to. The attic. Huxley closed the box. Dirt still clinging to his fingers. His grandfather hadn't just left him clue-seed, left him pieces of a life buried behind duty, silence, and sacrifice. And in chasing them, Huxley was beginning to see not only who his grandfather really was, but who he might become. With 3 stages behind him, Huxley now faces not just a trail of riddles, but a man's unresolved past, a hidden love, and a final destination that promises truth more than treasure. The attic, every room held a memory and a message. Huxley stood at the bottom of the staircase, eyes tracing the winding curve of the banister up to the attic door. The box from under the oak tree was still in his hands, its weight more emotional than physical. His clothes were dirt-streaked, his palms raw, but something inside him was sharper, more awake than it had been in years. He hadn't stepped into this part of the house since he was 17. That was the last time he and his grandfather had spoken, really spoken. The fight had started over a college rejection, and ended with words Huxley could never take back. After that, Grandpa had cut off contact. At least, that's what the rest of the family believed. Now, Huxley wasn't so sure. As he climbed the stairs, each step creaked under his feet, like the house remembered him, like it had been waiting. At the top, the attic door stuck in its frame, swollen with time and humidity. With a grunt, he shoved it open, sending a cloud of dust into the narrow shaft of light pouring in. From the small round window, the attic smelled like cedar and forgotten years. Stacks of trunks lined the walls, along with old furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts frozen mid-conversation. Huxley stepped inside, scanning slowly. Nothing jumped out, no neon sign pointing the way. But he didn't expect that. If Grandpa had hidden something up here, it would be buried behind meaning, not just material. He moved toward the far corner where the sunlight caught the edge of a chest he vaguely remembered. Dark mahogany, brass handle, initials carved on top. RACHE knelt beside it and opened the lid. Inside, photos, dozens of them. Some he recognized from mantels and hallways. Others, he'd never seen before. Him as a boy on Grandpa's shoulders, at the orchard, laughing by the lake, crying in front of the broken kite Grandpa had later helped him rebuild. Each one was labeled on the back, not with dates, with lessons. Don't fear failure. Fix what you can. Accept what you can't. Silence says more than shouting. Always listen to the second answer. It hit him suddenly. These weren't just memories. They were messages. A curriculum disguised as nostalgia. His grandfather had been teaching him even when they weren't speaking. He pulled out one envelope buried beneath a stack thicker than the others. It wasn't marked by stage or clue. It simply said, "For the day you're ready." He opened it slowly, breath held. "If you've made it to the attic, then you've faced more of me than I ever had the courage to show while alive. I was raised by a man who believed emotions were weakness, that love had to be earned with obedience, and I passed that curse on to you. You didn't fit that mold. You were born with questions in your mouth and fire in your chest, and instead of watering that fire, I tried to stamp it out. I've spent years regretting that. This house is filled with echoes. Echoes of who I was, who I pretended to be, and who I hoped you'd become. Walk it, remember it, but don't live in it. Below this floor, in the study there's a book. The red one. Inside is the final clue, but don't run to it yet. Not until you walk the house and remember. Memory is a mirror. Let it show you what I never could. RAC. Huxley sat back, chest tight. The old man had ridden with more emotional clarity in death than he ever had in life. And now, he wanted Huxley to walk the house to feel it, not just move through it. So that's what he did. He descended the stairs, not rushing, not seeking, but remembering. First stop, the dining room. The same one where the will had been read just hours ago. The long polished table, the chandelier overhead. He remembered sitting there as a boy, swinging his feet beneath the chair, trying not to fidget, while his grandfather grilled him on current events and vocabulary words. He used to think it was punishment. Now he saw it was preparation. One framed photo hung near the corner. His grandfather, shaking hands with a business partner. Huxley touched the glass. "You were never just teaching me to be smart," he murmured. "You were teaching me to be tough." Next stop, the library. A towering room of bookshelves and leather chairs. He used to sneak in at night and read by flashlight, always hoping not to get caught. Grandpa always did. But instead of yelling, he'd pull a chair beside him and say, "If you're gonna read, read right. Start with Steinbeck." On the shelf, east of Eden, a yellow bookmark still inside. Huxley opened to the marked page, a single underlined line. "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." It hit like a whisper to the soul. The study came last. A dark paneled room with a fireplace that hadn't seen flame in years. The desk was untouched, still holding pens, papers, and the familiar smell of tobacco Grandpa always denied using. The red book was easy to find. It stood out from the spines of navy and brown, bright, worn, unassuming. Huxley pulled it down, opened it. Inside was a hollowed-out center, a note. And a key. Final piece. "Hux, the cottage in the woods. You know the one. We built the porch together. You thought it was a project. I told you it was a test. Inside, you'll find what I really left you. Not just a place. A truth. But you have to go alone. Bring the compass." Huxley closed the book, holding the key tightly. He knew exactly which cottage Grandpa meant. They'd built it when Huxley was 15, a summer project that felt more like boot camp. It was the only time they truly worked side by side, no arguing, just hammering, sawing, building. After it was finished, Grandpa had locked it up and said, "Maybe someday, you'll finish what we started." Now, it made sense. It wasn't a shed, it was a vault, a final space meant just for him. He stepped out into the hallway, the house now strangely different. Not emptier, but more alive. Like it had spoken to him, one memory at a time. And he had listened. With the final key in hand, Huxley is no longer following instructions, he's following understanding. The next step isn't just about inheritance. It's about completion. One last journey to a place that holds the real heart of everything. His grandfather couldn't say out loud, "They didn't like that I was still in the house." The moment Huxley stepped back into the main hallway, he felt the shift in atmosphere like a cold draft. The warmth of memory quickly gave way to the bite of suspicion. Murmurs died as he passed the parlor. Eyes followed him like so. No one spoke directly, but the silence screamed louder than any confrontation. He should have known it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Aunt Valerie intercepted him near the front staircase. Arms folded, lips tight. "You've been busy," she said flatly, eyes flicking to the dirt on his jeans and the worn envelope in his back pocket. Huxley didn't bother pretending, just following instructions. Instructions. She raised an eyebrow. "Or chasing secrets that don't belong to you." Uncle Gordon joined, his voice sharp. "Whatever you think you're entitled to, there's nothing left." He made it clear. "The estate's already divided." "I'm not here for that," Huxley replied, calm but firm. Valerie stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then why are you sneaking around the house like a scavenger? Digging in gardens, unlocking rooms no one's been in for years." Her gaze narrowed. "What did he leave you?" Huxley met her stare. "That's between me and him." They didn't like that answer, because what scared them wasn't what he might take, it was what he might know by afternoon. The pressure was undeniable. Cousin Tyler cornered him in the side corridor near the drawing room, all smugness and forced friendliness. "Hey man," he said, patting Huxley on the back like they'd ever shared a warm moment. "Look, if this is about money, maybe we can work something out. I get it, he screwed you in the will. But if you've found something else, let's talk." Huxley blinked. "Something else?" Tyler smiled thinly. "Come on, you're not that subtle. You're running around like you're in some Don Brown novel. You really think there's some hidden vault with gold bars and offshore accounts?" "I think," Huxley said slowly, You're scared I was left something you'll never understand. Tyler's smile cracked. Don't get cocky. This family knows how to protect what's theirs. No, Huxley said, stepping past him. You know how to chase what's shiny. You never cared about what mattered to him. You cared about what you could use. Word spread fast. By early evening, whispers became plans. Someone locked the attic door from the inside. Another accidentally moved the red book. The gardener claimed no one had touched the lion statue in years, only for Huxley to find him, quietly stuffing a dirt-stained envelope into a trash bin. Hours later, it wasn't subtle, and it wasn't random. They were trying to erase the path he was on, one step at a time. But Huxley wasn't afraid, because what he was following wasn't made of paper, or keys, or hidden compartments. It was made of intention, of lessons, of a legacy. No one else in that house had the patience or humility to receive. Still, it wore on him the eyes, the cold smiles, the sense that every move was being tracked, timed, and twisted. That night, he stayed in his childhood room, door locked, compass on the nightstand, letter clutched in his hand. Outside his window, he swore he saw Valerie walking the perimeter, as if guarding something, or hunting for it. They thought he was chasing treasure, but they didn't understand. He already had it, and it had nothing to do with gold. The next morning, Huxley rose early before sunrise. He packed a small bag, folded the final letter, and tucked the key into his pocket. The air was still, but tense, like the house knew he was leaving. He moved quietly down the hallway, careful not to wake anyone. But, as he reached the front door, Gordon was already there, coffee in hand, eyes sharp, like he'd been waiting. You're leaving, he said simply. Huxley nodded. You won't find what you're looking for out there. I already did. Gordon smirked. You know, your grandfather wasn't some wise monk. He was harsh, rigid, cold. You weren't special to him. You were just different. Huxley stepped closer, voice low. And yet here you are still afraid he left something just for me. Gordon's face hardened. Huxley continued. If he'd left me land, or a vault, or a title, you'd all have lawyers on me by now. But because he left me something you can't define, it terrifies you. With that, he opened the front door and walked into the morning light. He didn't look back. Leaving the main house behind, Huxley sets out for the cottaged space, untouched by the family's greed, preserved by memory, and built with his own hands. There, the final truth awaits. He wasn't the man they thought he was. Neither was I. The cottage sat on the far edge of the woods, wrapped in a silence that felt almost sacred. Morning mist clung to the grass as Huxley approached, the compass warm in his palm. The same cottage he and Grandpa had built together stood just as he remembered it, weathered but solid, with a porch they had hammered into place over a long, grueling summer. At the time, he thought it was punishment. Now, he realized it was training, a rite of passage disguised as sweat and splinters. He stepped onto the porch, pulled the old brass key from his pocket, and unlocked the door. The air inside was cool and still, filled with the scent of cedarwood and dust. The cottage was one room, a bed, a desk, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with books and tools. But what stood out was the leather-bound journal resting at the center of the desk. Its cover embossed with the initials RAC. Huxley picked it up carefully. A note lay beneath it. This is everything they never knew about me, and everything I hoped you'd become. Start from the beginning. The first page of the journal was dated October 68. The entries weren't financial records or business plans. They were reflections, failures, regrets, hopes. They were raw, personal, human. Married Margaret today. She's solid, dependable. But I keep thinking of Evelyn. Haven't spoken her name in 5 years. Started the foundation. Everyone thinks it's about prestige. But really, I needed something that meant something. Saw Huxley fix the porch hinge on his own today. Kid doesn't ask for help. Just finds solutions. Reminds me of who I wanted to be. Page after page, Huxley read the inner life of a man no one else in the family ever truly knew. To them, Grandpa had been ironclad wealthy, powerful, emotionally distant. But here, he was something else. Haunted, idealistic, deeply self-aware, and at the heart of nearly every entry from the past decade Huxley's name kept appearing. Not Tyler, not Gordon, not Valerie. Huxley. He doesn't know it, but I've been watching. He's not like them. He questions everything. Good. The world needs men who don't just accept what they're handed. Left a copy of Man's Search for Meaning on his dorm bed. Didn't sign it, but I hope he reads it. He's angry. I would be too. I raised him with my mistakes. He didn't deserve the silence. Huxley sat down slowly, overwhelmed. Everything he thought he knew about his grandfather, the coldness, the disapproval. The silence was only part of the picture. The truth was, Grandpa had been building something with him all along. In shadows, in secrets, because he hadn't known how to do it any other way. Hours passed. He read every word. By the time he closed the journal, dusk was settling over the trees. He stood, placed the book gently back on the desk, and turned toward the fireplace. Something stuck out from the base. A wooden panel with faint markings. He knelt, pried it loose, and found a final compartment inside it. A wooden box. He opened it slowly. Inside, a pocket watch. Not gold. Not flashy. Just clean and simple. Engraved with one word, time. Tucked beneath it, a letter. You thought this would end with a vault of cash, didn't you? But no. This is all I have left. The time I never gave you. The time I wasted chasing appearances. I can't reclaim it, but maybe you can use it better than I did. You're not a reflection of me, Huxley. You're the correction, and if you're reading this, then you're the man I always hoped you'd become. Finish what we started. In your way, not mine. That's your inheritance. R.A.C. Huxley stood there for a long time, holding the watch. The words echoing in his head, like a quiet revolution. This wasn't just closure. It was permission. Release. His grandfather hadn't failed him. He'd been preparing him. The real gift wasn't wealth or property. It was clarity. A map back to himself. He left the cottage as the last light faded. The woods were silent. The house was behind him now. And so was the version of his grandfather everyone else had known. They'd inherited the empire. But he'd inherited the man. Back at the estate, the family was gathered for dinner, wine poured, smiles rehearsed, stories polished for social appearances. Huxley entered quietly, dirt on his boots, journal in hand. The room quieted. You're back, Valerie said. Surprised and irritated. I am, Huxley replied. And I'm done. Done with what? Tyler asked. A note of sarcasm. Following, he set the journal on the table. What's that? Gordon asked. The part of him none of you ever saw. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Let them chase the will, the assets, the land. He had something better. He turned and left the room without looking back. With the full truth now in hand, Huxley is no longer just uncovering the past. He's stepping into a future shaped by its wisdom. But the confrontation between values, greed versus growth isn't over yet. It all pointed to one place, on one truth. For days, Huxley had followed letters, clues, and memories scattered across the estate like breadcrumbs, each one peeling back another layer of a man. The rest of the family thought they knew. But now, as he sat in the garden beneath the old lion statue one last time, everything finally settled into focus. The compass, the journal, the letters, the lessons, it had all been guiding him toward something deeper than objects or land. It wasn't about possession. It was about purpose. He turned the compass over again in his hand, staring at the engraving. What you seek is what you've always had. At first, he thought it meant wisdom, self-worth, but now, he understood it meant legacy. Not inherited. Built. That night, Huxley stood at the edge of the estate's grand hall. The family once again gathered under the ornate chandelier. Laughter floated on top of veiled tension. Paperwork had been signed. Properties claimed. Furniture tagged. The vultures were nearly done picking the bones clean. He stepped forward. Journal tucked under one arm. Pocket watch clipped to his chest. His presence halted the room. Before I leave, he said, calmly, I think you all deserve to know what he really left behind. Valerie rolled her eyes. We've seen the Codicil, Huxley. You got your box and your keys. No one's stopping you from keeping your little sentimental treasures. Gordon sipped his scotch. Let the boy have his mystery. The rest of us have real responsibilities to manage. Huxley stepped to the fireplace, rested the journal on the mantel. This isn't about mystery, he said. This is about truth. He opened the journal to a bookmarked page and read aloud. If you're reading this, then you've seen what I never showed. My regrets, my hopes, and how I buried everything I was ashamed of beneath marble floors and forced silence. The real inheritance is not hidden, it's not buried, it's not locked away. It's the freedom to walk your own path, unshaped by expectation, untouched by greed. The room was silent. Tyler scoffed. So what? That's it. You went on a nature walk and found his diary. That's your big treasure. Huxley turned to face him. No, that's his. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pocket watch. This was the last thing he left. engraved with one word, time. Because that's all he had left. And it's all we ever really own. He paused. He spent his life building empires. You all spent a week fighting over them. I spent 3 days walking in his footsteps, and realized none of you ever knew who he was. You only knew what he owned. That landed like a stone. Valerie's mouth twitched, searching for a rebuttal. There was none. Gordon stepped forward, glancing at the journal. And what do you plan to do with this righteous clarity, Huxley? Build a statue. Write a memoir. No, Huxley said, finally smiling. I plan to live differently. He gave me permission to let go, to move on, to start fresh. He reached into his coat and tossed the key to the estate's south property and untouched, valuable piece of land, to the table. He left this for me too, but I'm giving it back. Let the foundation sell it and fund something that actually matters. And with that, he turned, compass in hand, and walked out. Outside, the night air felt cleaner, lighter. The stars above were sharp, quiet witnesses, and for the first time since the funeral, Huxley felt like he wasn't being watched, measured, or doubted. He was just free. Everything his grandfather had wanted for him. Everything he hadn't had the courage to give in life, he had handed over now, not wrapped in ribbon or legal documents, but in meaning. With the emotional storm behind him, Huxley now steps forward into his future not as a rejected heir, but as the one who understood what true inheritance looks like. This was never about money. The words left Huxley's mouth without anger, but they struck the room like a thunderclap. He stood in the grand dining room, journal in one hand, pocket watch in the other, facing the very people who had spent the past week reducing legacy to ledgers and sentiment to assets. His family sat around the long mahogany table, polished plates and untouched wine between them, wearing expensive clothes and empty expressions. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just clear. Valerie leaned forward, her pearl earrings swaying. You think you're better than us now, because you found a few scribbled notes in an attic and walked around barefoot in the garden. No, Huxley said calmly. I think I finally understand something none of you ever tried to. Gordon huffed. And what's that? That Grandpa never cared about what you're all fighting over. A pause, a twitch in his mother's eyes. Tyler leaned back, arms crossed, ready for a show. Huxley continued. You think he was this cold-hearted tycoon, who only respected tradition and order. But that wasn't the man I found in those letters. That wasn't the man who left me riddles instead of riches. He set the journal gently on the table. He knew he couldn't say certain things out loud, that his pride wouldn't let him be vulnerable while he was alive. So he gave me the only inheritance that mattered. Tyler scoffed. A bunch of guilt-ridden diary entries. Huxley's gaze didn't waver. Perspective, forgiveness, self-worth. He gave me permission to be the man he couldn't be, and the one I always feared I wasn't. They were listening now, not because they respected him but because something about his certainty made them uncomfortable. Valerie snapped. Oh, please. We all had our moments with him. But when the will was read, he made his decisions. You got what he thought you deserved. No, Huxley said. I got what he wished he could have given all of us. He walked over to the window, looking out at the estate gardens, now dipped in golden twilight. I used to hate this place, he said. Every wall reminded me of something I failed at. Every hallway felt like judgment. But now, I see it differently. This wasn't a prison. It was a mirror. It showed me exactly who I didn't want to become. Silence, then. So what now? Gordon asked. You give a moving speech and walk away enlightened. No, Huxley said, turning back. I walk away free. He held up the pocket watch. This is the last thing he left me. One word, engraved on the back. Time. Because in the end, that's all any of us have. And you've all spent yours, chasing something he never valued the way you thought he did. They looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language, so he tried again. He didn't want me to inherit the estate. He wanted me to inherit his evolution. To live better than he did. To stop measuring myself by his silence. To forgive him. And to forgive myself. His mother, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was soft. He was harder on you than he should have been. Huxley nodded. Yes, but I think he knew that. That's why he left this for me. To explain what he couldn't say when he was alive. She looked down, as if realizing just how much had been missed. Not just between grandfather and grandson, but across generations. The silence they all learned to live with. The emotional debt passed down like heirlooms. And for once, no one argued, no one mocked. they just sat with it. Huxley stepped away from the table, heading toward the front doors. Valerie called after him. "You're really just walking away? After all this?" He turned. "I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward." He paused, then added, "If any of you ever want to see who he really was, read the journal, not for what you'll gain, but for what you might finally understand." And then, with nothing else left to say, he left the room and the life he'd been expected to live. Outside, the night air greeted him like an old friend. He took a deep breath and stood still for a moment, feeling the weight in his chest loosen. The compass was still in his coat pocket, but he didn't need it anymore. He knew exactly where he was going, and more importantly, who he was becoming. With the confrontation behind him, Huxley sheds the last of his old identity. What lies ahead is not riches or resolution from others, but peace from within. He's no longer chasing inheritance, he's walking in legacy. He left me more than money. He left me a mission. The road stretched long ahead as Huxley drove away from the estate, gravel giving way to smooth pavement under the tires of his grandfather's old truck now his. The scent of leather and faint pipe smoke still clung to the seats, as if the old man's presence hadn't quite faded. In the passenger seat lay the compass, the pocket watch, and the journal, his true inheritance. The sun was rising behind him, casting golden light over the mirror, as if reminding him, don't look back too long. He had left the mansion, the family, the chaos, but he hadn't left empty-handed. What his grandfather had given him wasn't just closure, it was a call to action, a torch, passed in silence. A week later, Huxley stood in front of the foundation office, the one his grandfather had started decades ago as a tax strategy, but later grew into a quiet philanthropic effort. It had been largely ignored by the family, tucked away in a modest building downtown, overshadowed by corporate ventures. But Grandpa's journal spoke about it often, with regret, with longing, with hope. They wanted the name. I wanted the work. The part that mattered always sat in silence, waiting for someone to listen. Huxley entered the building with steady steps. The receptionist looked up, confused at first, until she saw the journal tucked beneath his arm. Recognition sparked. "You're Huxley," she said. "He told me, if someone ever came in with that journal, to let them in. No questions asked." Inside the modest office, files were stacked neatly, donations tracked, initiatives outlined but unfinished. It wasn't a grand empire. It was a blueprint waiting to be built by someone who understood. On the desk, in an envelope marked for Huxley, was one final letter. The others weren't wrong. They just weren't ready. They wanted to protect what I built. You're here to build what comes next. The foundation's yours if you want it. Not for status, not for comfort, but because you see people the way I always wished I could. You'll know what to do, and when you don't ask better questions. That's what you always did best. Start small. Start true. The rest will follow. Huxley folded the letter slowly, heart full not with grief, but with conviction. This was the real inheritance. A legacy unfinished. Not a mansion. Not money. A mission. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. In the months that followed, Huxley restructured the foundation from the inside out. He redirected funding toward community education, mental health programs, and mentorship for young men, especially those from fractured homes. Like his own had been, he partnered with people who didn't look like boardroom elites, but understood pain. People who didn't need suits to make a difference. The first project he launched, a small wooded retreat named after Richard Callahan, not as a monument, but as a sanctuary, a place for boys who didn't fit the mold, just like Huxley hadn't. Every decision he made, every policy he rewrote, he thought about the journal, the letters, the way his grandfather had tried, imperfectly, to be understood. He wasn't trying to fix his grandfather's legacy. He was building his own. And strangely, that felt like exactly what the old man had wanted all along. Huxley's path has shifted from seeking answers to living them. What began with questions has evolved into quiet conviction, proving that inheritance doesn't end with death, it begins with what we choose to do with it. I never got to say goodbye, but he knew. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill just beyond the edge of town, flanked by tall oaks and wildflowers that swayed gently in the summer breeze. It was peaceful in a way the estate never was, unburdened by expectations, untouched by pride. Just names, dates, and the silence in between. Huxley walked alone, hands in his coat pockets, boots crunching softly against the gravel path. The morning was still, not heavy with grief, just full of the kind of calm that comes when something unfinished finds its end. He stopped at the grave, Marked, Richard Alistair Callahan, 1938-2025 builder, father, learner. A fresh bouquet of white lilies rested at the base. Someone had been here already. Maybe his mother. Maybe no one. It didn't matter. Huxley knelt, pulling the compass from his pocket. The one that had led him through every twist and turn of the estate and through every buried truth between them. He turned it in his hand for a moment, then set it down gently on the edge of the grave. "It's yours," he said softly. "It always was." He sat for a while, letting the silence speak. There was no grand speech, no dramatic tears. Just presence. Just peace. "I hated you for a long time," he finally said. "Not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't. The things you never said. The things you never showed. I thought you left me behind." He took a deep breath. "But now, I see. You didn't leave me behind. You led me forward." His eyes drifted over the carved name, the clean stone. "I wish we'd had this version of you when I was younger. I wish I hadn't waited until after you were gone to understand you." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "But I heard you, in every letter, in every silence you finally broke." Then, almost as an afterthought, he pulled out the pocket watch. The hands were frozen at 4:47. The same time etched into the sundial. The moment Grandpa had said his life had changed. Huxley smiled. "That's the minute I changed too." He placed the watch beside the compass and stepped back. No funeral crowd. No final speech. Just a grandson, giving his grandfather the goodbye they never had in life, but somehow found in death. And that was enough. With the final goodbye made, Huxley steps forward into a new life not burdened by inheritance, but carrying the quiet strength of legacy. What comes next is not an ending, but a beginning. "I came with nothing. I left with everything." The estate faded in the rear view mirror like a distant chapter ornate, cold and heavy with stories that no longer belonged to him. Huxley drove steadily toward the horizon, the morning sun stretching wide over an open road. No map, no plan, just the quiet assurance that he wasn't lost, just finally free. When he had first arrived for the funeral, he was carrying years of bitterness, doubt, and silence. He hadn't come expecting answers, and certainly not closure. But what he found was more than an inheritance. It was an invitation to understand, to heal, and to begin again. His grandfather had not left behind treasure. He had left truth. In the pocket of Huxley's jacket sat the final item he had taken from the cottage, a handwritten quote, tucked between the last pages of the journal. It read, "Be the man I couldn't. That's all I ever wanted from you." Now, with that echo guiding him, Huxley wasn't heading toward a destination. He was becoming one, a mentor, a builder, a man who asks better questions and listens for the quiet answers, a man defined not by what he inherited, but by what he chose to carry forward. He smiled to himself as the road opened wide. Ahead, legacy, he realized, isn't what we're given. It's what we create, once we know who we are. Funny, what funerals reveal about the dead and the living. Huxley had walked into his grandfather's funeral expecting awkward glances, silent resentment, and an empty goodbye. What he hadn't expected was to be chosen not for wealth or power, but for truth, for legacy, for healing. In the eyes of the family, he left with nothing. But what they never sought, they never looked for, was that his inheritance wasn't written in numbers or locked in safes. It was tucked inside letters, buried under memories, and hidden in quiet moments the old man could never say out loud. Through each clue, each page, each step, Huxley didn't just rediscover his grandfather. He discovered himself. The pain, the distance, the silence, they weren't the end of the story. They were the beginning. Because sometimes, death doesn't close a door, opens one, to forgiveness, to purpose, to becoming the person you were always meant to be. Huxley wasn't just the grandson who came back. He was the man who listened and finally understood. And that was everything.